Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of This Week So Far. Today is not a particularly funny day. I'm going to break from the typical humorous format for today's episode because, as I said, frankly, it's not very funny today. Yesterday, an ICE officer shot and killed Renee Nicole Good. Feels like a bit of a cruel twist of fate that her last name should be so lovely. If you completely avoid social media and the news, you may have missed this. I think it's incredibly important that you are aware of this specific event. Let me break this down somewhat slowly. A federal officer shot a civilian. There's video of this everywhere. It's hard to describe because mortifying, terrifying, horrifying, these words are not strong enough. Ultimate evil, something like that. I ask that you watch it. I didn't want to watch it. I don't really want you to watch it, but I do think that you should watch it. I think you should see several angles of it so that you can see for yourself. Renee was not attempting to run over anyone, certainly not an ICE officer. Also, as an American citizen, she should not have been a target of ICE. And I think you should watch it because the Trump administration will attempt to bury this or distract you from it. If you think this can't happen or won't happen in Texas or Louisiana or Vermont or wherever in the U.S., think again. Because it happened, and it happened in Minnesota, of all places. Beautiful, peace-loving, school lunch-providing Minnesota. The worst thing that Minnesotans have done to the U.S. is act semi-Canadian. We'll come back to Renee at the end. In a similar but less deadly vein, there was an activist arrested mid-interview. The New Republic reported that we saw a video circulate. Multiple other reports came out talking about this protester in Grand Rapids, Michigan. She was arrested while on camera. It was literally during an interview, and of course she was criticizing the U.S. military action in Venezuela after we did the snatch and grab of Nicolás Maduro. The woman was later detained. Authorities cited charges like obstruction of the roadway, though the critics are saying that the arrest is obviously timed with her commentary. Also, January 6th was Tuesday. On this, the 5th anniversary of the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol, the White House and Donald Trump have finally come clean and apologized for instigating the attack and promised reparations for all the victims. No, they fucking didn't. Instead, they launched a controversial website, literally a propaganda website, with a revisionist narrative of what happened. So they're portraying participants as peaceful, patriotic protesters. Ridiculous alliteration. Also, yeah, sure, stomping cops into the ground. Hitting politicians with hammer? Definitely peaceful protests. Also, this website criticized Democrats such as Nancy Pelosi for gaslighting the public, also downplaying established facts about the violent riot. This whole effort is being condemned by opposition leaders, historians, commentators, fact-checking outlets, because it's propaganda as opposed to an honest representation of what happened. There's a little bit of good news here. Associated Press reports that a Hilton-branded hotel in the Minneapolis area canceled reservations for DHS and ICE agents en route to an immigration operation. Hilton Corporate actually says the incident occurred at an independently owned franchise, which supposedly violates corporate policy, and the hotel has since apologized and been removed from Hilton's system. This has sparked debate over corporate responsibility, law enforcement accommodation. To be clear, though, this independent former Hilton hotel had the guts to tell ICE to just fuck right off. Outstanding. I need to look up the name of this hotel now. I wasn't necessarily planning on visiting Minnesota or Minneapolis anytime soon, but I may just have to go visit this nexus of justice in the USA. Let's talk a little bit about world news. PBS, dear sweet, potentially never to be funded again, PBS reports that there was massive demonstrations in Jerusalem. They're ongoing. This is related to ultra-Orthodox opposition to military conscription. During one of the protests, a bus driver actually struck protesters, which killed a teenager, injured others, and tens of thousands of people are marching. The driver was detained. Investigations are ongoing. The incident drew a lot of attention, as you might imagine, because some guy got hit by a bus on social media. Lawmakers and political figures are reacting strongly, of course. The event has fueled real reporting and some misinformation as well. But it's clear there's some local opposition to Netanyahu, and not a little bit. Seems like he may not be so popular at home. Gosh, it would be such a shame if Israel went full Nepal, huh? The Guardian reports continued fallout from the U.S. military operation in Venezuela. Tensions continue to ripple outward. Multiple nations and international bodies have criticized the U.S., as they should, because the action was a violation of international law. Yeah, of course. It was blatantly illegal for the U.S. to just take a leader from another country. Now we're supposedly going to run the oil in perpetuity? Good God. Latin American leaders have condemned the operation, while protests and unrest persist in the region. And the U.S. government's aggressive posture has extended to talking about other interests like Greenland, which leads us to Greenland and U.S. military threats with a little splash of congressional pushback. There's some ongoing rhetoric here from the U.S. leadership. You may have heard Miller and Trump and the other ghouls talking about Greenland and that it should be ours and other nonsense. That's alarmed our allies, big surprise, and drawn some lines from U.S. lawmakers. And this one I appreciate because this is a sort of clear note to the military. Representative Ted Lieu, hopefully I'm saying your last name right, warned that the U.S. military force against Greenland without congressional authorization would be illegal. He basically said, if you're in the military and you're told to do this, and you go do this without Congress approving it, you are taking illegal orders. So it's all reflected in mainstream and live coverage of this stuff. But what does all this mean, really? For U.S. and domestic politics, the fight over January 6th is intensifying. The official government is lying, and the rest of us are saying, no, 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 no. Free speech and protest rights are again in the spotlight after this Michigan situation. Cannot believe they just arrested this woman during an interview. She's not doing anything. She's talking to the camera. There's corporate and political backlash. This Hilton incident happened, right? Even aside from ICE, it's triggered broader conversation about how corporate balances inclusivity policies with law enforcement and, political flashpoints. And then talking about international stability, Israel's witnessing some real ongoing large-scale protests, and there's fatal incidents happening. That could impact regional politics, perceptions of civil order, and now the U.S. with its foreign policy actions in Venezuela and Greenland continue to provoke global diplomatic responses. We're just going around making everyone angry. And I want you to be aware, quietly, while this all was happening, Trump has pulled us out of 60-something plus international organizations. So we're basically turning into Russia. Last but not least, before we go, I ask you once again to remember the name Renee Nicole Good. Remember people like Melissa Hortman and Mark Hortman. We cannot let them forget. I will not let them forget. We'll see you on the weekend.